Well, hello and welcome. It's another Confessions podcast for you from your friends at Radio 2, where listeners do very, very bad things indeed, and then tell me about them, and then we all have a laugh. So this week's concise collection includes a fairground fish and a carrot. It doesn't work. A fearful fable about a migrant Moggie, a whopper about the Winter Olympics, and a tricky troll tale. Yes, it's our first ever confession about a troll. Standing by for details. The confession the other day, Father Simon, about the dunked biscuit masquerading as cat mess, which was subsequently tested by a father to frighten his children, has prompted me to seek forgiveness from the posse with the power to pardon for a similar type of incident. How about that?
We're now a posse, are we?
The posse with the power to pardon.
Brilliant.
There you go, I like that. Like many children, my daughter, Holly, loved animals and was desperate for a pet. In particular, she was desperate for a Dalmatian puppy. However, my wife, Chloe, did not like pets. Indeed, her view of animals was that they were fine to eat and wear, but were specifically not something that she wanted in the house. And so with Chloe, a.k.a. Cruella, being completely intransigent on the topic of Holly's dream of a Dalmatian puppy or any other pet, it went unfulfilled. Until, that is, she was about 6, when at our local fair, Holly had a go at the hook-a-duck, and when it came to the prize, was offered either an inflatable alien or a goldfish. After much sucking of teeth, Cruella relented, and Holly became the proud owner of a goldfish. Holly was warned that the life expectancy for fairground goldfish was poor, and so for the first 3 months of its life, not dead yet, as it was called, lived in a small plastic goldfish bowl. After 3 months, he, or maybe she, how can you tell, was given a name, Goldie, remarkably, and a proper aquarium complete with filter, pebbles, lights, and numerous SpongeBob ornaments. Because that's what you do if you want to look after your goldfish. For the next year, Goldie seemed quite happy, although as a pet rather boring and non-furry, until a visiting child emptied a whole container of fish food into the tank in one go. Despite cleaning the tank, the next day Holly discovered a now grey Goldie swimming oddly on his side, a.k.a. floating. Goldie was duly buried, and Cruella gave away all the fish paraphernalia as quickly as possible and resisted further requests for a pet. She's a charmer.
Excellent, straight away. Get him out!
She's a charmer. Several months later, when the fair reappeared, Holly and I hatched a plot. With a plastic bag, bottle of water, and a carrot sculpted into a rough goldfish shape, we all went to the fair. This is great. Holly and I left her mother, Cruella, talking to some friends and went off to go on a couple of rides. Out of sight, we emptied the water and carrot into the bag, and Holly ran back excitedly, showing off her prize. Seeing this, Cruella went ballistic. There was shouting and swearing and accusations about my irresponsibility and recklessness until I said, "Oh, hang on," and popped the goldfish into my mouth. I flapped the tail about a bit and said, for effect, just as a group of teenage boys who hadn't heard the whole preamble wandered past while trying to impress some similarly aged girls. They all screamed, all like girls, at the disgusting spectacle of a middle-aged man apparently eating a live goldfish as I crunched and swallowed. So I would like to seek forgiveness, not from Cruella or her friends, who were momentarily horrified, or the goldfish, which was in fact a carrot, but to a group of boys whose ambitions to impress and pull were no doubt severely dented. When in front of their prey, they squealed and behaved like a bunch of horrified girls, says Jonathan. Well, it's a jolly good wheeze, really, and it was just a carrot. So that they were particularly... It reminded me of the confession that we had a while back about someone who ate some eggs from the bottom of a bird cage, but it was just the Cadbury's eggs, you know, the ones that look like...
That was brilliant.
Anyways,
I love that. I love that kind of thing. What a great sense of humour. Do you think that the wife, Cruella, did she not know until just now? Do you think he never fessed up?
That's a very, very good... That's a very, very good...
I think that if she just found out the truth, that would be hysterical.
No, I think they would have said at the time... I think it's one of those things... She would have been so horrified. He said, "No, look, it's a carrot," and...
Yeah, really, really good. I just hope it didn't give the teenage boys ideas. But no, I thought that was an excellent joke, and you're completely forgiven.
She sounds like an absolute peach, doesn't she?
Cruella's brilliant, isn't she? I love that, because normally with these sort of confessions where it involves a child and getting the pet and the parents clearly don't want the pet, is that, you know, your sort of heart softens a little and says, oh, all right, then we'll help you out. I love the fact that as soon as that fish is barely cold and in the ground,
out,
and it's get rid of all the rest of it.
I completely understand that. We've had our school fair goldfish for over 4 years, and as you know, I hate it.
The whole point was that it wasn't going to last that long.
Exactly.
4 years, huh?
4 years later.
They're supposed to stay, yes.
And it's massive.
Yeah.
Massive. Yeah, we might have to get another tank. Can you believe it?
Buy another house for your
exactly.
Well, you could.
for your fish.
Do carrots float? You could always just arrange. Oh, well, never mind. Anyway, Matt, what do you think?
So
did you forgive or not?
Yes.
Yes, you did. Yeah.
I think I'm going to forgive just because of Cruella. And you know, no expert on courting the ladies, but squealing in front of them's never a winner, I would have thought. So yes, I'm going to forgive.
I apologise for Alan Dedicote fans. Apparently, he has a cough.
Well, no, there's no apparently about it. He
does
got a
have
cough.
Yeah, well, some of us just work through it.
Yeah, well, you come in with pneumonia.
Regardless. Anyway, here's tonight's confession. Send yours, of course, please. confessions@bbc.co.uk. The Confessions podcast is there to download. bbc.co.uk/radio 2. This one comes from... Let me see. Give us a name, Matt.
Derek.
Okay, it's from Derek.
Sorry,
Thanks,
that
Matt.
was obviously not Matt.
Dear Father Simon and the Holy Collective, please pardon me for I'm seeking not just your forgiveness, but also wider-reaching powers that you and your gathered brethren possess. I know, being an avid listener, that you receive confessions that have plagued many people for many years, but my guilt is so great that I write to you begging for redemption for a story that has occurred within the last few weeks.
Ooh, wow. Breaking news.
Well, almost, yes. Breaking confession news. 8 years ago, my then-girlfriend and I decided to take our relationship to the next level and bring 2 ginger kittens into our lives. Despite the hissing, scratching, chaos and general odours, 2 cats quickly settled into blissful quasi-family life. Lovingly, we welcomed them into our lives, and in return they paid us back with great affection. 7 years ago, we married and moved house. Thus, the cats revelled in their self-proclaimed family bliss. The birth of our first son, Richard, caused a rise of a feline eyebrow, but the cats seemed to accept it. The birth of Iris and then our third child, Harry, have, however, tried their love for us. But despite tails occasionally pulled and pungent nappy odours, the cats did manage to accept their place in the pecking order, which was obviously one up from the bottom, with me, the husband/father, clearly at the bottom of the social hierarchy of the family, says... Did you say Derek?
Yes.
Derek. Might be his actual name, you never know. The cats rarely strayed away from the house, knowing that chasing mice and taking part in an active life was, frankly, far too much hassle. It seemed to make far more sense to stay around the house waiting for their human servants to feed them. The serene picture of family life was rudely broken about 6 weeks ago, when one of our cats failed to show his face for the morning feed. By day 3, things were looking grim, as despite our searches, he had failed to appear. As I was leaving for work on day 4, I was preparing a speech in my mind to the children on my return home about explaining about how the cat has gone to heaven. To my surprise, a guttural meow could be heard, and the cat returned. No explanation of his whereabouts, all a bit of a mystery, no harm done. A few days later, however, this serenity was shattered when once again the cat disappeared. The children began asking more and more questions, and even they were starting to suspect my half-hearted explanations were pitiful lies, as I mumbled various attempts at subterfuge which generally ended with, "Go ask your mother." On the 5th day of the cat going missing, my wife received the dreaded text message from a friend. Do you still have both your cats? Clearly this didn't sound good. When she replied that one of them was missing, the fateful text arrived. I think you need to go to the main road, as there is something you need to see. Obviously it ended up being me that had to go and see, and armed with an old green towel, off I went. The floods in Worcestershire still hadn't abated, so just my luck. A long line of stationary traffic watched as I walked down the path, towel in hand, looking a bit sheepish. After a few minutes, I felt that the friend had been mistaken. As I was about to turn and head back, sadly, it turned out that the news was as feared. Our poor cat was obviously in a place departed from earth. I put the towel to good use and returned home, as even the previously mocking glances of the drivers in the queue now turned to sympathetic gestures of sorrow. I arrived home where my wife and I uncovered the towel to be sure it really was our cat, and after confirming his passing from the world, we shed a tear and informed the children that their cat had indeed gone to heaven. After the customary 1,000 questions that now followed, the children went to bed and my wife and I selected a piece of the garden where he could be laid to rest. I took my solemn duty, dug a spot underneath the tree the cat used to climb. We went to bed beginning a new life as a one-cat family. For the next few weeks we managed to dodge the occasional awkward question and shot longing looks through the window to the final resting place of our feline companion. His life had been good, and he'd been a loyal friend. We cancelled the pet insurance for one cat, washed up only one cat bowl, and bought significantly less cat food. I know you know that this is going to be... I know you know which way this is heading already.
Yeah.
At the weekend, we were involving ourselves... That's the end of the story. That's the end of the story.
Well,
Sorry about that, kids. At the weekend, we were involving ourselves in the usual chaos of family life. We decided that we would take the children out for something to eat and cheer them up. I left the wife to put the children in the car, and I generally made the house secure for our exit. As I was preparing to leave, cheered by my beloved Ipswich actually winning a game, I was brought out of my dreamlike state of euphoria by some shouting from outside. It was our son, Richard. He seemed agitated. His voice was growing louder by the syllable. It was turning to screams. Father Simon, I need to beg your forgiveness, not just for one or two choice words that left my mouth with what I was about to witness, but also for the range of thoughts that were flashing through my mind. I know that you can guess what, or rather who, I was not looking at as I stepped outside the house. It's the cat.
Obviously.
It's the cat who has come back from the dead. The cat who had already died twice and been buried once. The cat we cried over. The cat who was in heaven, or at the very least laid to rest in our garden in a deep hole that I had dug. The cat who was now staring back at me with demonic eyes. I know I should have been happy. The children were triumphant with cries of, "See, told you I hadn't gone to heaven." My wife was emotional. There were tears of joy. Now, there were multiple reasons why I felt unable to join in with the celebrations and cheering. You see, I need forgiveness for being genuinely terrified of the cat that has returned to haunt me. Even now, when I glance at him suspiciously and wonder if it's a demonic plot, I am seriously thinking he might be possessed. Did you ever read Pet Sematary by Stephen King?
Yes.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, that's what we're all thinking
that's
now.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
So I need forgiveness for the pitiful explanations that I attempted to use to explain the afterlife to my children. I guess I don't need forgiveness for the poor cat, who clearly wasn't ours, but we did give it a proper burial. I do, however, need forgiveness for the poor person who as yet we cannot trace, whose feline friend has a final resting place in our garden. And I suspect everybody knew almost from the second paragraph precisely where the story was heading. But it's a genuine issue for Derek. And he's clearly slightly torn, and every time he looks at his returned cat, which has brought much joy to the family, he's somewhat spooked. And if you've read Pet Sematary, you'll be seriously spooked.
Is he sure it's actually his cat, the one that's giving him weird demonic looks?
Well,
you know, he checked out the one that went in the ground.
Exactly right. They checked the one that went in the ground,
Yeah.
so maybe...
Anyway, maybe that's a kind of a cat doppelganger. Anyway, he was being as honest as he could with his children, wasn't he? I mean, he didn't lie to the kids. He told them exactly what had happened, that the cat had died and gone to heaven. And as far as he was concerned, that's what had happened.
Do cats go to heaven, do you think?
I don't know. Probably the equivalent, cat heaven.
Is there
Yeah.
Is there a cat heaven?
Probably.
What do you think? What do you think?
We'll never know, will we?
Let's go down that route. Let's
We'll
definitely
never
do
know,
that.
so you might as well say maybe. I think you should put up a poster near where the cat was found saying to the owner of the cat that's disappeared and explaining what's happened. That would go some way towards assuaging his guilt. But I think, you know, you've got nothing to be forgiven for, so yeah, you're completely forgiven.
Cat could come back as a goldfish. Anyway, Matt,
Yeah, wow.
Do you forgive
Well,
Derek?
here's the thing. The kids are perfectly happy, aren't they? Because the kids are like, wow, look at this. The cat has survived being buried in the garden, apparently. So it's only Derek that's really messed up over this. He's the one who sees the demonic eyes of the cat. And I suspect he was never a massive fan of the cat. That's my suspicion. I think he was secretly happy that the cat was gone. And the cat's come back. So it's all your fault, Derek. Unlucky.
Has the cat come back from heaven, do you think? Is it a ghost cat?
You're obsessed with this cat heaven. Right, no, and no. So I'm not going to forgive.
Well, it's time for another Drive Time confession. Gather round, everybody, and send in yours, should you have one, confessions@bbc.co.uk. And the podcast is available in case you miss any. Feel free to download. This one comes from Mrs. S. That's how we're calling her. Dear Father Simon and your merciful colleagues, I'm sure you will sympathise when I tell you I began this year by going under the knife on the operating table. Thankfully, this was a planned procedure on my foot and not a hideous end to a disastrous New Year party. I wouldn't have thought it was that anyway, but that's what Mrs. S is thinking. To be honest, it was quite dull. Anyway, my recovery is slow. Consequently,
yeah.
She says consequentially, so I'm just going with Mrs. S's language. I'm still hobbling around on crutches. But on the upside, I've enjoyed several weeks off work, and as a bonus, this period covered the entire Winter Olympics. I've returned to work now where I teach in a junior school, although I hasten to add I'm not a fully fledged teacher, hence I use for the word consequentially. Personally, I believe you'd have to be a bit crazy to take on that job. Anyway, the thought of returning to the classroom with limited mobility was a little daunting, and I'm afraid this may have led to my dubious actions. Inevitably, the pupils said to me, "Oh, Mrs. S, what did you do to your foot?" Well, to be honest, I don't know why, but my reply was something like this. "Well, did you see any of the Winter Olympics?" "Yes," they'd say with enthusiasm. "Well, that was me. That's what I've been doing." "Really, miss?" "Yes, did you watch any of the snowboarders?" I'd ask. "Yeah." "Well," I continued, "that slope was pretty lethal, and I'm afraid I didn't quite manage to bring home any medals because obviously," indicating my poor foot, "I fell and I just couldn't continue. I was trying racks my brain at this moment, a frontside rodeo. Yeah, it's very, very tricky." Now, initially, I felt this story would be so unbelievable that the children would quickly dismiss my outlandish claims, but much of their scepticism was shaken by my quick responses to their suspicious questions. "Well, think about it," I'd say. "I've come back to work just as the Olympics has finished. That's not a coincidence."
No.
You know Jenny Jones, who won the medal? We're really best mates. I taught her how to do backflips. Yeah, that's true. "No, you wouldn't have seen me on the TV because I wasn't good enough to be interviewed by Claire Balding, but she did buy me donuts." "Yeah, I had a great evening with Lizzie Arnold. She gave me some skeleton lessons." Yeah, no, really. "The men's curling team, they were a riot. You wouldn't believe how they can party." Anyway, I'm afraid I was weak when faced with the temptation of numerous innocents willing to believe what I said. I am a teacher. But not a proper teacher. What began as an absurd joke snowballed into fact. There are still a few pupils who ask, "Did you really hurt your foot snowboarding in the Olympics in the British team?" But I can hear a little spark of uncertainty in their voice. Would Mrs. S really tell us such a whopper? I have to tell you, I'm even starting to believe I really was part of the team. So lying to children is not encouraged in my school, but none of my colleagues have dobbed me in. So from a professional point of view, I feel vindicated, says Mrs. S. So from whom am I asking forgiveness? Is it the kids? No chance. Their parents for any preposterous stories they've been subjected to? Well, maybe. The committed athletes who have worked so hard to earn their place on Team GB? Yes, definitely. I have shamefully assigned myself a place in this elite group of sportsmen and sportswomen, and I humbly beg for your forgiveness. P.S. Remember my operation.
Right, okay.
Now, I kind of know the way Matthew's going to go on this because and where he stands on lying to children. But Mrs. S she's not a fully fledged teacher, but she does teach in a junior school, and her story is she was off work because she was in the British Winter Olympic team snowboarding.
I like the way she elaborated on the story and brought in the frontside rodeo and the various different sports.
Quick thinking.
And the partying with the men's curling team.
Well, you would.
Yeah, you would, but I do think that kids are gullible. That's the problem here. And I know that Matt thinks that's a reason to exploit them and be mean to them, but I have the opposite view. I think that you should not exploit that weakness. And also, if you're in a kind of senior position, I know she's not a fully fledged teacher, but you should respect that and not not take advantage of the poor
moralising,
things. And they're
that's
never
what we're
going to
getting.
believe what teachers say in future. So for that reason, not really for the athletes, but for the kids, actually, I'm not going to forgive.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, lie to the kids, no problem with that. I also love the frontside rodeo thing. Basically, from watching, and I know very little about snowboarding, but from watching the commentary of that during the Winter Olympics, it appears to be put a direction next to a random word, and that's a move. So backwards kangaroo or whatever. There you go, that's a
The
move.
McTwist and the double McTwist. They were my
Yes,
favourites.
yeah, lovely. So clearly there are some benefits from just sitting on the sofa and watching sport on the telly. So good for you for finally finding a reason why we should all be doing that. So I'm going to say yes, forgiven.
I thought you would. Now, we're using real names, by the way.
Really?
Yes. This is from Helen. Because she wanted real names used. Father Simon the Collective, I'm writing my confession, although those involved now know about it. They feel it needs to be passed by you and your team to decide if I and we are worthy of forgiveness. Let me set the scene. We're a family of 6, and in the event in question, which took place 10 years ago, when the children were the following ages. Here it comes. The oldest, Sophie, was 12. Our next daughter, Gemma, and the victim in question, was 6. Then there's Jack, who's 4, and Katie, who was 2. Gemma, the 6-year-old, was a magical thinker at the time, which we were unaware of, but have since found out means that she always saw things literally. For example, when I told her I was going to pop over the shop, she imagined I would disappear and then reappear as if by magic, popping at the shop. When she had an enlarged gland in her neck from tonsillitis, the GP said, "Oh, you got a golf ball in there?" And she asked him how it got there. Anyway, you get the picture. That's the kind of child she is. Anyway, we always holiday in Cornwall and have stayed in the same area and campsite since Sophie was 4. We love it, they love it. If we go anywhere else, they say, "Can we go back?" So that's where we go. We would spend our days going for nice walks in the area, often taking us hours and taking picnics with us. The children would have their own backpacks and their lunches in water bottles and waterproofs and all that kind of thing. They had favourite walks, and it was on one of these that the story is set. The walk was around Frenchman's Creek, real Daphne du Maurier country, and we would think of ways to make the walks interesting for 4 young children. To do this, we would search for things like bees, frogs, toadstools, squirrels, snakes, shrews, pixies, fairies, goblins and trolls. The first 6 we saw regularly. Sadly, the latter 4 were very elusive. But we would shout, "Look, there's a pixie! Oh, do you see that flickering light from... That's a fairy, definitely." That was the level of our conversation. Their dad, Dave, and I would tell them to watch out if we came to a large rock or a bridge or a stream, just in case there's a goblin or a troll in there, and explain to them that they're very quick and can grab their leg or their backpack for their lunch. This particular year, Gemma asked us if they were real. Yes, we said. Sadly, that's how we lost your big brother, Peter. How about that?
Some scarring.
Okay.
Brilliant. Just fallen off a treadmill there, Joe. Backward flip.
So, here we go. I had an older brother, said Gemma. Yes, that's why there's 5.
no!
That's why there's 5 years between you and Sophie, and only 2 years between you, Jack, and Katie. We said. Well, what happened to Peter? Well, when we reach this bridge here, there's an area where a small wooden bridge with a gap underneath it with a stream runs down the hill. A goblin jumped out, grabbed Peter, and disappeared. Oh, she replied, looked carefully around the bridge and the rocks, and we slowly walked on. We didn't really talk much about it and soon forgot this little story that we'd made up. Sophie obviously knew it wasn't true. Jack and Katie were too young to take it in. And we thought Gemma also realised it wasn't true as our walks continued with lots of fun and laughter. And no more mention of Peter, despite lots more talk of goblins and trolls. Then when Gemma was about 12, so this is 6 years later, we were walking Frenchman's Creek again. And when we came to Peter's Bridge, Gemma, now all sad, said, "Dad, isn't this the bridge where where Peter got taken by trolls?" And she had a very reflective and a very subdued voice. We realised she'd been sad for a while.
6 years.
Grieving for it.
It was at this point that we looked at each other and realised that Gemma had and still did believe her non-existent brother Peter had been taken by trolls all those years ago. We explained that it was not real and that it had just been a story that we'd made up on the walk, and we didn't think she'd believed us. Here's the line. Gemma got very angry
Yeah.
and stormed off, refusing to speak to us until we got back to the caravan. We sat with her and talked it through, and to this day, every time we walk Frenchman's Creek, we have to pay homage to Peter's Bridge. Gemma feels... here's the thing. Gemma feels before she can forgive us, we need to seek forgiveness from you, your collective, and your listeners. So here I am, says Helen, asking for forgiveness for our sin of Peter, the non-existent brother who was taken by the trolls at Frenchman's Creek. Sounds like a great folk song. Yours in shame and hopeful anticipation, Helen. P.S. Gemma is now 16 and has insisted I use real names. So, that's the information. It's a shocking story. Lying to your kids. Is it always a good idea? We'll find out about Matthew in just a moment. Let's go first to Jo Wiley as she makes her debut. What do you say, Jo?
Well, Gemma's obviously harbouring quite a lot of anger and pain. If she's insisted that they use the real names, she's obviously very, very cross.
Yes.
That is completely unforgivable. Very, very funny, but completely unforgivable. She needed counselling, I'd imagine. She's been grieving this brother for like 6 years.
6 years. She thought she had an older brother taken by a troll.
How could you do that?
Well, they just thought it was a good joke, and they didn't realise that she was a magical
Maybe
thinker.
think it through a little bit.
Maybe.
Yeah, so no, unforgiven, sorry.
Okay.
I think there are jokes and then there are jokes. I mean, you can say that there are fairies under the tree, but you just can't see them. But to say that your brother was taken, I mean, that's really macabre. And they also knew that Gemma was really gullible. I just don't get it.
Well, I don't think they did know the fact that she believed things literally at the time.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Anyway, as it turned out, Gemma was clearly traumatised by that. And I agree with Jo. I can't forgive that.
Let's try Novice Nige.
Well, yeah, what I'm kind of surprised at is that Gemma harboured all this for 6 years. She never discussed it with any of her siblings or any of her mates. So no doubt she is in treatment, what have you. But this brother who could not be mentioned. There should be a blue pack on Peter's Bridge now, I think that's definitely. But I do not forgive on this occasion Damaged Dave or Horrid Helen.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what people make of this. But here's Brother Matthew, who always thinks it's a good idea,
It's
remember?
okay to lie to your kids, definitely. But I do think they missed a trick here in saying, yes, your elder brother Peter was taken by trolls, but you could have used that to say, because he wouldn't do his homework and didn't help with the washing up, and that's what happens when you refuse to cooperate. So I'm not going to forgive, but only because they missed the opportunity to have her living in fear for the next 6 years.
Do you think they meant to tell her but then just forgot?
No, they thought it was a funny story. She wasn't going to believe it, really, and they just had a laugh.
Oh.
Anyway, there they were. They were this week's confessions, and it may well be that it sparked something in your head because you have something to tell me. Confessions at bbc.co.uk. More in a week, and the Weekly Mayo available to download now and every Thursday. Thank you so much.